Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Shashank S, and today in this video we'll be learning about entity. So firstly we'll be going through the introduction part, then the types that are used in this entity and what's the relationship between them and how these entities are actually identified. Then we'll be learning about some attributes and roles that are used in entities. And then we'll be going through structural constraints, and at the last we'll be learning about weak entities and how these weak entities are identified. So moving into the very introduction part of this entity. So basically an entity relationship modeling is a fundamental technique that is used in the database management system, which helps a user to understand and represent the given information in a certain structure. By identifying the key entities along with their attributes and the relationships between them, one user can create a comprehensive model that captures the complexities of a real world system. Entity types. So what are entity types? These are the fundamental building blocks of an entity relationship model, which represents the key objects or concepts in a certain domain, and they also define the structure and characteristics of the data that has to be stored. Identifying the entity types. When designing an entity relationship model, the very first step that has to be taken is to identify the key entity types that needs to be represented. These could include things like customers, products, orders, employees, and any other significant objects relevant to the problem domain. Relationships between entities. Entity types can have various relationships with one another, such as one to many to many, or many to one. So these relationships are a crucial part of the entity relationships model and helps to capture the connections and dependencies between different data elements. Entity sets. An entity set is a collection of entities of the same type. It represents a group of objects that share common properties and also can be distinguished from one another. Entity sets form the backbone of an entity relationship model, thereby providing the building blocks for describing the structure of a given database. Some common examples of entity sets include customers, products, employees, orders, departments, etc. etc. Each of these represents a distinct group of related entities that can be uniquely identified and managed within a database. So what is the importance of using these entity sets are? Defining entity sets is a crucial step in database design process as it helps to organize and structure the information being stored, thereby grouping related entities together, and a user can more effectively manage data, enforce business rules, and ensure data integrity. Attributes in entity. Attributes are the properties that describe the characteristics of an entity. They also define what information is being recorded about each instance of an entity type. These attributes can be anything like such as a name or a number, or more complex like a description or an image. Key attributes. Certain attributes like key attributes uniquely identify each entity instance. These are used to distinguish one entity from another, such as a social security number or a product ID. Key attributes are critical for maintaining the data integrity and enabling efficient query. Composite attributes. Some attributes can be further divided into smaller, more detailed components, and they are called as composite attributes. For example, person's address could be broken down into street, city, state, and zip code. Composite attributes provide a more granular level of information. So what are roles in entity? Roles define the part that each entity plays in a relationship. They specify the participation of entities in a relationship and how they interact with one another. Directionality. That means the roles can be directional, which means they can indicate the direction of a relationship. Like for example, in a works for relationship, the role of employee is distinct from the role of employer. Cardinality. Roles can also specify the cardinality or number of participants in a relationship, which helps to define the minimum and maximum number of entities that can participate in a relationship. So moving into structural constraints, we have entity relationships, cardinality, participation, and referential integrity. So what is entity relationships? So these structural constraints define the rules and limitations that are governing the relationships between entities in a database. These constraints ensures the integrity and consistency of the data by specifying the permitted interactions between entities. Cardinality. One of the most key structural constraint is cardinality, which defines the number of instances of one entity that can be associated with a single instance of another entity. This cardinality can be one to one, one to many, or many to many. And at the third, we have participation. So this participation constraints determine whether the existence of an entity instance depends on its relationship with another entity. This can be either mandatory or optional. And this participation ensure that entities are properly connected within the database module. And at the last, we have referential integrity. This referential integrity constraints ensure that the values of a foreign keys in a relationship must match the values of the primary keys in the related entity. This prevents orphan entities and maintains the logical consistency of the database. Oh, moving into the last topic of the video, we have weak entity types. So how are these weak entity types actually identified in the entity? So weak entity are those entities that do not have the primary key of their own and rely on the existence of another entity to be uniquely identified. They are often dependent on their parent entities for their existence and identifying information. Relationships between weak entities. So weak entities can participate in relationships with other entities, being both strong and weak. These relationships help define the dependencies and the connections between different parts of the data model. Modeling weak entities. Properly modeling weak entities is crucial for capturing the complexity of a real-world data. It involves understanding the dependencies, relationships, and also the constraints that govern these entities within the data ecosystem. Yeah, so now we'll be learning in depth how these weak entities are actually identified. So we can see a pyramid over here. So this pyramid states us how these weak entities are identified. So at the first stage, we have observable identifiers, which means they lack some of the unique keys. And at the second, we have partial dependence. That means these weak entities are always dependent on other entities like parents or parent entities or something. And at the third stage, we have complementary identifiers. So these weak entities always need multiple attributes to identify. So identifying weak entities is crucial in entity relationship modeling. The key signs include a lack of unique identifier, partial dependence on other entities, and also the need for multiple attributes to fully identify an instance. So all these characteristics distinguish weak entities from strong, independent entities and inform how they should be modeled and represented. So if understanding the indicators of weak entities allows database designers to properly capture the relationships and dependencies within the system, thereby ensuring data integrity and enabling efficient querying and retrieval. Relationships between weak entities. Dependent relationships. Weak entities often have dependent relationships with their parent strong entities. This means that the existence and identification of the weak entity depends on the existence of the related strong entity. Identifying relationships. The relationship between a weak entity and its parent strong entity is often referred to as an identifying relationship. So this relationship is used to uniquely identify the weak entity based on its connection to the strong entity. Weak partial key constants. Weak entities typically have a partial key, which is a set of attributes when combined with the primary key of the parent strong entity that uniquely identifies the weak entity. So this partial key is what defines the entity relationship. And now we are at the end of the video. So in this video, what all we learned is we learned about entity relationship modeling, which includes entity types, entity sets, and their attributes and also their roles. And we also learned about structural constraints. And at the end, we learned about weak entity types, how these weak entity types are actually identified, and also what's the relationship between them. So by understanding these core principles, organizations can effectively design and model their data landscapes, ensuring data integrity, consistency, and scalability. These insights gained in this video can help you empower data-driven decision making, thereby improving operational efficiency, and it also supports you for the development of robust information systems. Yo, that's all in this video. If you found this video helpful, please do like and share my video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.